right, let's call this Community Library Network Board of Trustees regular meeting to order. The first, let's see, all board members are here. And I would like to say that our director has been called away on a family emergency. I got the call at 1:15. It really is a family emergency. So, yeah, yeah. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, on the agenda, you guys, which I know you switched out and we took things that we will move, we moved a few things from the original agenda onto next month, the meeting room policy and the study room policy. In addition, I would like to switch 2 items on here. And I would like to take the adult programming and switch it with executive session. So the executive session would come right after director's report. And the reason for that is we have a consultant and our attorney here and we can release them sooner. Will that work for everybody?
Tell me where it is again, I was looking at the agenda.
Adult programming annual report,
Right.
switch it. Look at, and then there's executive report. We pull the executive report up under director's report and put adult programming under circulation and statistics. So we'll just swap them. That's correct. All right. The next item on our agenda is public comment. And I have my words to say, first of all. Welcome to the Community Library Network's regular Board of Trustees meeting that is open to the public. The public library is founded on the First Amendment, which is freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. And that's exactly what we're doing here today, gathering together to freely speak. The 2 most important things I would like all of us to remember today are to be respectful of one another and to be civil to one another. We may not like what somebody is saying, but they have a right to say it without interruptions or distractions from the audience. Please treat people as you would wish to be treated if you were up at the podium. Now I'm going to read some of our policy. The Community Library Network Board of Trustees operates under the Idaho Code open meeting law. The board will be pleased to take comments under advisement, although we will not be responding at this meeting. The board is committed to conducting its meetings in a civil, orderly, efficient, and productive manner. Please sign in before speaking, giving your name and community. Comments should be directly to the board and not to the audience. A time limit of 3 minutes is allowed for each speaker. We had a little bit of a problem with that last time. If we do again this time, I am simply going to stop the meeting, get up, walk out, wait till we have some sort of agreement with our rules, and then we will move forward again. But one person starts to, push forward and talk over, and everybody does. If everybody chooses to talk over, eventually public comment we have 28 people here who would like to speak. I would like us to be respectful of them all. A person may speak at the podium once during the meeting. In cases of disagreement, the speaker must use grace and tact. Persons addressing the board are expected to observe a level of civility and decorum appropriate to a public meeting. No personal attacks or disruptions from the audience members will be tolerated. It says the board chair may terminate or redirect any presentation not adhering to these guidelines. I would also like to make a comment here. Hang on a minute. All right, at the close of public comment, you are welcome to stay and listen to the rest of the meeting. Today, we have moved 2 items of particular interest to the community to the top of our agenda. The first one is a new policy. The library card for minors policy will be discussed today. The policy was developed directly in response to concerns expressed by the community. The purpose of this policy is to provide parents or legal guardians with tools to supervise their children's library use. It will allow parents or legal guardians to choose one of 3 different types of library cards for their children. The second item that we moved to the top, but that is going to be truncated, was the director's report. The director, as I said, has been called away on an emergency. But among other things, the director, and not today, perhaps, but another day, the next time that we meet, the director will be addressing recent reconsideration of materials requests during that report. Okay, let's get started. The first person to speak today is Charity. Oh, one more thing. If you read a passage from a book or could you please give us the name of that book and the pages that you are reading from? Okay.
Yes, thank you. Do I have to push something or is it on?
I think it's on.
Okay, thank you. In the statement that Katie Blank read at the beginning of this meeting, she makes it clear that she, along with the majority of the CLN board, not only embrace obscene and pornographic content for minors, but she is proud of promoting material that depicts adult on minor rape, sodomy, the romanticism of teen prostitution, incest and drug use, the glorification of self-mutilation, and suicidal ideation as a service to a diverse community. Our libraries, under the corrupt direction of Chair Katie Blank and Vice Chair Judy Meyer, have become the #1 supplier and distributor of child pornography and obscene material to minors in our community. When Idaho criminalized the distribution of obscene material to anyone under the age of 18 and granted an exemption to libraries, they never intended for our libraries to become the #1 distributor of this pervasive filth. It was intended to allow for works of true literary merit, like a graphic description of a rape survivor's story to healing, a brave description of the struggle to rebuild a healthy and vibrant life out of the ashes of abusive or drug-riddled beginnings, and stories with redemptive outcomes that show the strength and resilience of the human spirit to overcome evil. Not the erotica of adults raping and sodomizing and sexually abusing children, not the glorification of the sexualization of our children, not the graphic depiction of teachers first grooming and then abusing their students, not the enticement of young girls into body dysmorphia and self-mutilation, not the encouragement of teen boys to drug, bind, and assault their peers, and not the perverse lie that tells our children the sum total of their worth is the objectification of their sexuality. It is clear the majority of the CLN board supports and defends being the #1 distributor of obscene material to minors, as they've taken no actions to stop it. They have not issued a statement of apology for promoting and distributing this destructive and damaging material to minors. They haven't directed their staff to pull the vile material off the shelves until it can be thoroughly reviewed. What are they afraid of? What is so upsetting about children being protected from harm? Their support of this pervasive filth shows that they are unfit to serve as trustees. They have abused the public trust. They have aligned with those who seek to destroy the innocence of the children, namely HREI, an anti-children, anti-family, hateful activist group in our community. So where does the pursuit of progress stop? Where's the twisted view on diversity? Where does it end? Do we get to look forward to literary works that glorify cannibalism? Or perhaps ones that celebrate slicing the clitoris off little girls? Or maybe you only celebrate hacking the penis off little boys because those books already are here. Or maybe your love of evil will bring you to the literary heights of books that create a perverse and sexual excitement by depicting
your time
bestiality.
is done.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Please, 25 seconds.
I'm sorry. I thought that was the
Then
timer.
who is the timekeeper? Right here.
May I
Is it?
begin?
Okay, was that the time?
There's 25 seconds left.
You move your timer up there so you don't get confused.
I will wait until you tell me I can go.
Thanks. I'm, okay. Michelle, you're doing the timing? Okay, and so she has 25 seconds? Okay.
Thank you. Or will your love of evil bring you to the literary heights of books that create a perverse sexual excitement by depicting bestiality, complete with visual images? Katie, Judy, you have shown a lack of conscience, and that is why we are here, to awaken your conscience to truth. The truth that our library, under your direction, is peddling smut to children. We will not forget what you have done, and I hope that those in the community are paying attention.
Do you have a list of the books that do you have a list of the books
I would be happy to email you some.
That sounds really great.
Thank you.
We have the timer up towards the front so we know when we're starting.
I didn't do that, but I can't be two places at once.
Well, or at least they go or something, so we know we're actually on.
Just being one thing.
Sure.
Also, is there a 30-minute warning? Is that what we're at right now? Is that? Or did it just cut off? We do a 30-minute warning, how about I say?
Karen Campbell. We are a little bit short-staffed today. Our timer is gonna be in the back of the room, because we need help back there. So we will do our very best and, you can,
Actually say your name and that's when I start.
you say your name and the timer starts.
Does it stop?
It stops at 3 minutes.
Okay, Karen Campbell from Hayden. I come before the board with love in my heart because God loves each one of us. We all need truth and direction in our lives. Truth brings peace, joy, confidence, and direction, not confusion, deception, and instability. For example, we know 2 + 2 = 4. We know this is true. If you were to tell me 2 + 2 = 5, I know that's false. I have peace and confidence in the truth. And it's what I want to say, it's obvious and truth matters. If truth didn't matter, then all my calculations would be off. God's word gives us truth right here and direction. 2 Timothy 3 says all scripture is God breathed. It is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the man of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. The Bible was written under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. God breathed. God's word guides us in what is evil, what is good, what is sin, and what is godly. Numbers 23:19 says, God is not a man that he should lie, nor a son of man that he should change his mind. Does he not speak and not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? God is truth. His words are true. In Galatians 5, the acts of the sinful nature are obvious. Sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery, idolatry, and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, and the list goes on. Apostle Paul continues in saying, I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things there is no law. In Isaiah 5:20, it says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness, who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. In Luke 17, Jesus said to his disciples, things that cause people to sin will bound to come, but woe to that person through whom they come. It would be better for him to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around his neck than for him to cause one of these little ones to sin. So watch yourselves. We all need to watch ourselves in the decisions we make that affect others, especially the children. Here in the library board meeting, we are talking about books and activities that do not promote the protection, safety, and well-being of our children. Books that do not give truth of what is good, what is evil. Decisions that we make, and you as the board in the position of affecting many children, will be held accountable before God. We are living in a culture that believes the lie that good is evil and evil is good. God's truth sets us free and gives us peace and confidence. Thank you for this time, and may God guide you in your decisions.
Thank you. Thank you. Emily Christopherson. Emily? For the people who are speaking, somebody doesn't have to give up their chair. They can just, as long as, Randy, somebody doesn't have to give up their chair. If somebody's outside and is gonna come in to speak, nobody has to give up their chair.
Emily Christopherson. I live in Post Falls.
First, I want to very quickly address the library card for minors that is on your agenda. I think for many patrons, this will be a useful tool to help the library serve their families better. I think the age range for young adult, 12 through 18, is far too broad. We could use a middle grade reader section. As a mother, I wholeheartedly agree that I wouldn't want my 12-year-old reading a book that is geared toward a 17-year-old. But I feel I already have the tools needed to monitor what my children read. I think having a minors card is a way to answer some community concerns, but I also worry it's just one more thing some community members will use to chip away at our libraries. As we've seen in other states, few families opt into these kinds of options. It's completely unenforceable with self-checkouts. It will lead to an increased number of materials that magically end up missing. I think it's a very labor-intensive project, putting extra stress on our library staff who are already paid under market value. Our library staff, who I'm sure are under immense amount of stress from being targeted and falsely accused of being groomers and pedophiles, and even being bullied and mocked online by a trustee that currently sits on this board, Trustee Addison. And as there seems to be confusion about how public libraries operate, please remember there are not gates, walls, or vaults. Locking up the books you don't like, and children as young as 9 can spend time at the library without an adult with full access to hundreds of thousands of books and the internet. For many children, the library provides a safe space, sometimes a safer environment than their home life. As we're considering moving materials deemed harmful to minors, I would like Trustee Addison to answer, will we be locking up the computers? And that's my condensed 2-minute opinion on that. What is more important to share are the true stories from our libraries. These are my stories, but they're similar to what so many community members have told me through conversation, but don't feel safe speaking in public meetings where they fear being personally targeted and even harassed. We love the homeschool laboratory program. Last week, the theme was virtual reality. There were a variety of hands-on projects and activities, but the favorite was an app called Pixelate. It takes your drawings and turns them into video games or interactive mazes. My kids thought it was so cool. Actually, they said it wasn't cool. It was awesome. So awesome, we ordered the kit when we got home. Another service I knew the library offered is a book match. You just go on the website, type in books you like, and staff will handpick titles based on the criteria you entered. I used this feature to find a new book series for my oldest, and the next day, 3 new books were waiting for us on the hold shelves, selected just for her. She felt pretty important having a personal shopper. So as always, I thank you for your service and dedication to our community.
Thank you. Ms. Worcester.
My name is Liz Worcester and I'm in Post Falls. I'm here just to follow up on 5 books that I presented to the library in January that I thought were very sexually explicit and should not be in the young adult and under 18 part of the library. I've gotten 3 responses from you guys. Looks like, or excuse me, 4 responses. 3 of them, Red Hood, Damsel, and The Infinite Moment of Us, were all decided to be put into the adult section, which I applaud. Thank you for that. That's a step in the right direction. Sadly, the reasoning wasn't because they were sexually explicit, though. The reasoning was that the content of the book is geared toward an older teen and young adult, a new adult audience, which extremely vague. You still haven't admitted what is in these. Now, I didn't know you were going to have a library card for minors, which I think is also a step in the right direction, sadly, because of the crap that's in here. But another thing that needs to happen is there needs to be a label on the books that do get moved to the adult section that says sexually explicit material. Because as a parent, you're not going to know that's in that book, because even in the library catalog itself, it doesn't say there's sexually explicit material in these books. The descriptions are things like wolf attacks or dragons, fantasy. One of them says it talks about social issues, dating, and sex, but it doesn't say you're actually going to read about them graphically doing sex with each other. So there needs to be a label, because I know you guys really want the parents to be involved. So that's that. And the other book that was not removed is called Last Night at the Telegraph Club. and it's very sexually explicit, and it needs to be put into the adults, needs a rewarning, so I'm gonna send this as a resubmission. And finally, there's another book that we're waiting on to find out about, so I'll report on that. So if anybody wants to know which books I'm talking about, I'm not gonna read anything out loud because it's so offensive. But it does need to be looked at, so if anyone doubts whether there's anything offensive in these books, you can see me outside afterwards. I'll be here for just a little bit longer. And there's plenty of lists of those, so please get the sexually explicit books out of our library, especially out of the children's section. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Thank you.
could I ask a follow-up question of that commenter?
That isn't something we usually do.
I know it's not.
Okay,
Clarification.
is it clarification?
Correct.
Okay,
Ms. Worcester, could you just make sure, I'm not sure I understood. You said you submitted 5 requests for reconsideration, 3 of which have come back that the books will be moved to adult. And what has happened to the other 2?
Well, the fourth one I talked about too was gonna be kept in the youth section, which is, I disagree with, so I'm gonna send a resubmittal for that. And then the 5th one I haven't heard back yet.
Okay, thank you.
all right, that sounds good. Tom Hanley.
So resubmission. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, my name is Tom Hanley, Hanley. I'm a resident of Post Falls. This afternoon, I'm not going to read you Bible stories, nor am I going to quote scripture to you. But there is, however, a story in the Bible describing how Jesus drove out the money changers from the temple. Now, I'm not insinuating that you're money changers, nor that this institution here or the libraries can be likened to a temple, but it is understood that Jesus was angry. And that anger is properly referred to as righteous anger. What you've been experiencing from the citizens of Kootenai County at these board meetings over the last 2 years, that's exactly what you've been experiencing, righteous anger. And you've been informed repeatedly by the taxpayers that there are hundreds of books containing obscene and sexually explicit material in the children's areas of your libraries. Yet you have done little to remedy CLN's book selection policy enabling this scandal. And yesterday, on the side note, I just noticed that Regina McCree is running again, and I find that rather surprising. She's had 6 years to fix this problem, so I'm not sure she deserves another 6 years. Anyway, I digress. By your inaction, you are complicit in exposing children to filthy books. And you have chosen to put these filthy books on the library shelves using taxpayer funds. It is my opinion that any policy tweaks, and I think those are coming down the way here, any policy tweaks you implement now or in the immediate future are only being done while under duress or out of concern for your political future on this board. As you're surely aware, 2 of your 5 seats are up for election on May 16th. And I will admit something, I don't feel comfortable standing at this podium, by the way, for the 3rd time, providing public input. So instead of standing behind this podium, I believe in June, I will feel much more comfortable on the other side of it, sitting in either Regina McCree's seat or Judy Meyer's seat. I'm hereby officially announcing, I am running for Community Library Board trustee position, which will appear on the May 16th ballot. And I have in my hand right here my completed, signed, notarized declaration of petition for candidacy packet. And I was going to deliver it to Lindsay. I understand she's gone. So who should I give this to? Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Tom Meyer.
My name's Tom Meyer. We as a people have forsaken God. Our Creator loves us enough to give us His only Son as a sacrifice for our rebellion. We have rejected our Creator's standard. He says you should not kill innocent people, but we murder 3,000 babies every day in America. The Creator has also said that a man should not have sex with another man. He created men and women so they could make children. He says he hates homosexuality. We have embraced it. Every civilization that tolerated and embraced homosexuality came to ruin. Because we have rejected our loving Creator's righteous standard, there is no standard that we will not embrace. It started with calling pornography freedom of speech, quickly fell backward to decriminalizing adultery, next, no-fault divorce, normalizing homosex, gay marriage, and now we're at transgender agenda, which is child abuse. Encouraging children to mutilate their bodies so that they can appear to be something they are not and never can be is child abuse. Caitlyn Jenner can change his name, he can change his clothes, but he will never change his sex. He will always be a man. He will be judged as a man. You are people that history will condemn with the same vehement hatred that sane people have for the Nazis. Your attempt to sexualize children is grooming kids for pedophilia. Once you take innocence away, it can never be restored. You have created a God from your own imagination. Your problem is that God did not create you, nor will he be your judge. The Creator that will judge you is the one you fully reject. Because you have offended our children, it would be better for you to have an anchor chained to your neck and thrown into the depths of the sea.
Thank you. Tim Platt.
Board of Trustees, my name's Tim Ploss. I'm outside of Rathdrum area. The book readings that have gone on here in the past meetings have been an evil thing to listen to. We shudder at hearing the passages. It goes against our nature to listen and makes us imagine activity that should be kept private. For days, we rethink descriptions that appeal to sexual desires. The passages are evil for adults to hear and many times worse for teenagers to read. There are a couple of rules that people have followed since before the founding of this country. Don't think covetous thoughts, sexual covetous thoughts. Don't have sexual activity outside of marriage. Humans are created with basic appetites and desires for a reason. Without feeling sleepy, we might not take time to sleep and give rest to our bodies. If we didn't get thirsty, we might not take fluids in that our bodies need. Without feeling hungry, we might not take in the nourishment we require. Because of taste, we enjoy eating and eat enough. On the other hand, if we eat too much, it becomes a bad thing for us. We need to regulate how we satisfy our appetites with temperance and use it for the good thing, the good purpose it was given. Young people are still learning this, how to do temperance. The purpose of the sexual appetite is to conceive children and bring new life into the world so as to continue the human race. It is obvious by the nature of men and women. Without this appetite, many would never take on raising a family. It is part of the natural law, how we are created. Providing these obscene pornographic books to our children is irresponsible of the library authorities. The wisdom of past centuries knew better. It makes the young think it's normal to abuse sexual appetite for their own pleasure, and that it's even approved by authorities. It is destroying their chances of understanding its purpose and place is in traditional marriage to raise children. It causes young people to fantasize to satisfy their own newly discovered sexual appetites. It leads to addiction to pornography, abuse, and disorders that will interfere with them becoming parents of healthy families. It's bad for society and it's bad for our future. If the FCC can find radio stations for not bleeping out unacceptable words for the protection of the public, then the library can bleep out the bad books for the protection of the children. For more than 2 years, the library board has been warned over and over that their staff is offering obscene books to minors. Your inaction shows that you approve it. The time has come to change the board of trustees and clean the filth out of our libraries. I'm announcing my candidacy for the CLN board of trustees to replace Warren.
Thank you. Suzanne Kearney.
Suzanne Kearney, and I live in Post Falls. The Marxist revolution is here. Straight from the communist playbook, local groups are sexualizing minors under cover of the First Amendment. Let's talk about the First Amendment. In 1968, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in Ginsburg versus New York that obscene material is not protected by the First Amendment in relation to minors. This was upheld in 1973 in Miller versus California, which established current legal standards for, quote, harmful to minors law. These standards state that what qualifies as obscene differs based on adult versus minor status. Our state has laws restricting the distribution of obscenity to minors. Idaho Code Section 18-1515 defines disseminating material harmful to minors as making available A, any picture, photograph, drawing, or similar visual representation or image of a person or portion of the human body which depicts nudity, sexual conduct, or sadomasochistic abuse and which is harmful to minors, or B, any book, pamphlet, magazine, printed matter, or sound recording which contains any matter enumerated in paragraph A hereof, or explicit and detailed verbal descriptions of sexual excitement, conduct, or sadomasochistic abuse, and which taken as a whole is harmful to minors. Be aware, propagandists want to convince voters that the First Amendment is in peril. They cite so-called alt-right authoritarians who want to burn books, criminalize pornography, and impose a, quote, narrow religious worldview on others. This is a straw man ad hominem attack to incite fear and sway the electorate. No one is banning books for adults. No one is criminalizing porn for adults. The library's own material policy itself states, quote, materials for minors under the age of 18 that violate Idaho Code Section 18-15-13, 14, and 15 will be excluded from the juvenile and young adult collections. Librarians need to follow the policy they already have. Last month, you were presented with the solution of requiring parental approval for minors to access obscene content. Does your new draft policy include informed consent? Those who accuse protectors of minors of being a danger to society are engaging in classical Alinskyan methods. Alinsky's book, Rules for Radicals, which was dedicated to Lucifer, says, quote, accuse your opponent of what you are doing to create confusion and to inculcate voters against evidence of your own guilt, end quote. I guarantee you that sexualizing minors is a Marxist strategy and a danger to society. Those pushing sexual content on minors, whether wittingly or not, are aligned with the Marxists, while presenting themselves as freedom-loving moderates. They are either hopelessly inconsistent or intentionally deceptive. Marxism and liberty are absolutely incompatible. Don't be fooled.
Madam Chair, can I ask a follow-up clarifying question of our last speaker?
Sure.
Ms. Kearney, I'm not familiar with the book that you were showing us. I'm sorry, could I just have the title and the author, please?
It's called The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen.
Luke Emerson.
Luke Emerson, Coeur d'Alene. I'm going to start by saying that on my 3 deployments with the Army, I served with many patriotic LGBTQ service members. The reason why this is important is because last month an individual asked why books containing LGBTQ themes were on display and not separated from others. They wanted patriotic books instead, and books like the Bible. as a true Christian that follows the teachings of Jesus, I know it's unbiblical to attempt to force any religion. Regardless, I decided to bring some scripture verses, and I apologize, I have the chapters, not the books, or the page numbers. A person at the last meeting informed you that he had read some library books that are being challenged, stating that they all started the same, with drugs to lower inhibitions. Genesis chapter 19, quote, "Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him." So they did, and the firstborn lied with her father, and he did not know. Another community member stated that the material in the books is used for grooming and to normalize pedophilia. Ezekiel chapter 23. When men slept with her in her youth, caressed her virgin nipples, and poured out their lust on her. There are 27 other passages in the Bible with material similar to what's in the books causing an outrage, including multiple incidents of rape. It is not my desire nor the desire of anyone here to ban the Bible, regardless of their belief system. The reason I bring this up is because I would like you to consider that just because there are some words in a book that appear inappropriate, that does not mean the book is incapable of changing someone's life. It was said last month that it is the board's responsibility to protect our children, and for clarification, it is not your job to protect my children. It is my job to do that. My job as a parent to protect my children and parent them the way I want. I do not need an elected official to do that for me. I have a plan if you do want to assist with the protection of children. The second leading cause of death for people aged 10 to 25 is suicide. So I propose the library keep materials that reference LGBTQ people in the library and put them in the largest display you can, because LGBTQ youth are 4 times more likely to complete suicide. And what doesn't help is making these youth feel like a second class of citizens by desiring to remove materials that make other people want to know about them and build bridges of empathy towards them. To the whole library board of trustees, please understand that I know you are not creating murderers and child molesters. We can all agree that murderers and child molesters are evil, and they need to be held accountable for their actions. If someone believes that they need to shift blame to the library for child molesters' actions, then that person should be ashamed of themselves. A board should do what is best for the community and not what gets them reelected. Everyone here has a common goal to do what is best for our community. What we should be doing is working together towards this common goal rather than tearing each other down. Thank you for all you do for my community and my family.
Schofield.
So first, before I think I'd like to just say one thing, that even though the Bible has some explicit scenes in it, doesn't advocate or approve it. It just records the history of what was done. Just for clarification. My name is Scott Schofield from Post Falls. I'd like to start out with a quote from 2 world leaders. Number 1, Hitler, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." Number 2 is the fraudulent occupier of the White House, speaking to a group of educators, said, they are not someone else's children. Quote, "They are our children." It is very clear that there is a universal agenda, but more specifically, a national social engineering agenda for the destruction of our children. This grooming is a specific tactic to create confusion, break down the truth about basic biology, eradicate the parent-child relationship, and dissolve the morality the child has been taught. I suggest that you watch the explosive documentary, It's Elementary, which exposes the grooming of a child's mind. A quick research of ancient cultures reveals that children are commonly used for sacrifice, mainly for religious appeasement to their false god. Though our children are not being led to the altar to be physically slaughtered to some deity, our children are being led to the altar of social engineering and emotionally slaughtered to a woke liberal grooming agenda. The agenda tactic is wrapped up in nice books freely provided by this and library and many others, as if they were self-help or exploring options. If this was outside this library, it'd have to be put in the nearest adult store and considered porn. It is very clear that the ALA is training libraries and their allies to cloak all the garbage for kids under the LGBT umbrella that they can attempt to bludgeon parents' cause as haters. This current board appears to be just fine with the solicitation and grooming to queer the library is the goal. The tragedy is not that it's not helping the children. In fact, it's harming them. This is going on daily, and only certain media outlets are brave enough to report the exploitation of children. Here are a few examples I pulled. Probably familiar with Project Veritas, how a teacher is happy to help parents and their child affirm their social issues. Drag queen taught 11-year-old about anal sex. Trans-identified biological male daycare worker charged with sexually abuse of an infant in Kentucky. This is just quick, didn't take long to find them. Let me remind you that you are, as a board, are acting as accomplices to the sexualization of our children. You are doing this under the Idaho law that allows for schools and libraries to be exempt from illegal distribution of pornography. It is not just soft porn. For many of the experts that I've heard in some of the other meetings, this is hardcore pornography. There's a very wise saying that all things are lawful, but not all things profit me. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. And from this literature that these young kids are getting exposed to does not edify. May 16th is coming up. We'll be voting you out.
Mary Anna Cochran.
Mariana Cochran Rathdrum. Recently, this board held 2 special circulation policy discussion meetings. I acknowledge that this board finally seems to be attempting to make changes as a result of public outrage. From watching the meeting video, I have some observations and suggestions for your struggle sessions. Chairman Blank, at February 28th meeting, in reference to the public's concerns about the abundant displays of books on demonology, you replied, I don't know what that means. Well, the computer in your pocket could answer that. Actually, you don't even need your phone because we know the suffix ology refers to branch of knowledge, so I'm flummoxed while you're perplexed. Also at the same meeting, Trustee McCrae was unsure if our library still used the Dewey Decimal System in use since 1876. It's confusing because you also stated that you personally mostly access the nonfiction collection. Well, nonfiction is categorized according to the Dewey Decimal System. This dictionary is from the 423 section. Chairman Blank could use it to look up the definition of demonology. Also on February 28th, Chairman Blank, you stated that you wish there was an easy solution. So here's one. Since the word banning causes heads to explode, here's a word already in CLN's policy and applied regularly by the staff, weeding. So here's an example. The handsome girl and her beautiful boy from the young adult section. CLN owned only 1 copy of this book and its status is listed as lost since December 2021. Let's sample some passages. Mind you, the characters are 17 years old. I'm turned on, my penis is excited, and then I feel him, his penis is hard against me. He's turned on too, what a fucking pair we are. And her hands, her arms, they grab at my back now, lowering, touching all of me, and then they take hold of my butt. And then her hands slide quickly around to the front and grab at me, at my penis. Her wetness has enveloped me from her mouth to my face. From between her legs to everywhere, he cries out in 6, 7, 8 high-pitched moans as he orgasms beneath me. She eats me alive again, just like last night, and rides me with our underwear soaked between us again. Z kisses my chest, then my stomach. She's going to kiss my penis. She pulls out my underwear and she can see my penis. She puts it in her mouth and it feels good, like a massage for my penis. So it's odd that after 15 months of this book being lost, it's still in the system. Were you hoping some other kid would order it? Because it's lost, it's functionally out of the system anyway. So here's your easy solution, Chairman Blank. Take the next step and make it official. Weed this piece of garbage out of the system once and for all. It's not even an actual book. It's a listing of a book that CLN doesn't even have anymore. It'd be just one small change, but a demonstration that you're sincere about eliminating sexually explicit books in the young adult section. In reality, Chairman Blank, easy answers are for kids and minimum wage workers, not for trustee boards responsible for an $8 million annual budget for Idaho's second largest library system. There have been several young adult reclassifications quietly made within the last few weeks, so CLN tacitly admits you have inappropriate books for minors. Do the right thing or don't. The voters will on May 16th. We will turn over these 2 seats to 2 new trustees. Thank you.
Gary Andrick. Easy.
In the hall.
No, well, Michelle, Gary Andrick. He had to start. All right, Peggy Fry. Peggy Fry. Peggy Fry.
Oh, excuse me.
I hadn't planned to come today. I wrote down community FOL, which is Friends of the Library. I'm transitioning between Priest River and Post Falls. And I'd normally be exercising in here. I just want to say grateful for the libraries. I do understand their anger and I can understand all of this. First of all, history, I am biased. My mother was a high school librarian. It's called high school. My dad worked at the University of Washington Library. I grew up an avid reader, love the library. Checked out a book from the Priest River Library, science, encyclopedia for middle school, and I didn't get it because excellent book, 95% of it. Got to the last few pages. They're here trying to teach middle school that their future responsibility is to stop climate change. Not clean the air, clean the water, stop climate change. They can't do it. The next page was their vision of the future. Their vision of the future is you all live in beehives, take mass transit to your government jobs. Live happily all together. I almost ripped that book up, but I didn't. Did take it to the librarian so that she could be, especially the homeschool parents, way aware of, and I could use all the words that have been used here, offensive, just as destructive and to the mental health of kids, putting the, anyway, people, child abuse, child grooming, saying this is what they're responsible for. It stopped. Anyway, did that. And that was it. So I understand. More power to the libraries. I'm not willing to vote. They don't vote here. So, but in general, thanks to the libraries, and I'm keeping an open mind because there are all kinds of things that parents should be aware of. All kinds of things.
Thank you. Is it Mark Modan? Mary?
Marty Modans.
Mark, I'm sorry, I say it wrong every
Growing
time.
up with Modans when you're 5 years old, public school. But, I think it's fascinating. I used to be a leftist, by the way. I was a leftist until I was 29 years old. And then collectivism rammed up against my individualistic spirit. And then I became a conservative. Call me far right. I don't really care at this point. But it's really rich for the other side to lecture us about the First Amendment. The other side shuts down conservative speakers in college campuses every day. Where's the First Amendment for right-wing, for Christian people to speak on college campuses? I don't see anybody here protesting, disrupting the First Amendment there. When did that ever happen? When did people that condemn us for banning books ever mutter a word of dissent about banning speech? Every day for years on college campuses, there was a bunch of disgusting law school students at Stanford shouting down a federal judge, shouting him down, these spoiled brats. I refuse to be lectured to by people who are not intellectually serious. You can't have a debate with people whose only principle is power and control. Their principles shift day to day to day. They used to be condemning sexual harassment. 60 Minutes used to condemn sexual harassment. After Bill Clinton, crickets. They didn't care about it. In fact, some of the left-wing women said, I would love to give Bill Clinton a BJ. These are the intellectually comical
and intellectually, you can't have a debate. Like I said, I used to be a leftist. You can't have a serious debate with people who are intellectually fraudulent. All you can do is defeat them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Daniel Fry.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. The first point I had is maybe it would be a good idea to better plan your capacity for press. You let the civil attorney in because she was already on the list. Maybe next time you should have the press available so they can be here. When I've got to surrender my seat because there's not room for press, that is a problem. And I wasn't the only one. Fortunately, there was another lady who surrendered her seat so we could have 2 members of the press here. But if there's going to be an open meeting, there should be press here at all times. My next question is on your current sheet, it says the majority of these items are designed easy juvenile in the online catalog. Who is making the determination as to what is easy and what is juvenile on the online catalog? And to go along with that, if I understood your meeting last week or last month, that to contest a book, we had to submit it to the library, to the board, and then 3 members of staff would evaluate that book and determine whether that book was appropriate for the library or not. Is it possible to get a simple yes or no answer on that?
That's in our policy, yes.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So, my understanding, this would be almost like a legal matter where it would be up to me to build a case to say why or why not this should be in the library, correct?
We have a form that asks you a few questions.
Okay, thank you. My next issue is that have we determined what is considered pornography at this board? Is it a legal matter? Because it seems like a lot of this back and forth has to do with what is a moral issue. Is this ethically all right, or is this ethically not all right? Is it ethically okay for everybody to have access to any book they choose, or is it ethically not all right for anybody to have any access? In other words, where do we draw the line? Do we offer libertarian free will to everyone, minors included, and they can choose whatever book they choose to come off the library? Now, I know we're adding a library cards for minors here, but that doesn't necessarily negate the fact that a child can walk up to any section and still look at the book while in the library. I know in Seattle, my sister-in-law would cease to take her kids to the library because there was constantly pornography on the screens. She'd have to literally walk past the screens and there was the pornography available and she couldn't go there anymore. I'm not saying that's what is happening at any of these school boards, but it begs the question, where is the line drawn for what is ethically okay for a minor to have access to? And I applaud you for taking the time to put up library cards for minors. That's a step in the right direction. But what is the next step that this library board is prepared to take to prevent kids from incidentally walking into this material? I've got 5 kids, and at any age, I wouldn't want them walking into pornographic material. Is that 3 minutes? Wow, that was fast. All right, thank you very much.
Teresa Burkett.
My name is Teresa and I'm a resident of Post Falls. I am a mother and grandmother who supports my library and board of trustees. I am against an option for juvenile cards. I am tired of parents shouting they want control of their child's education, but expecting library staff to police their book selection. It is the duty and obligation of parents to monitor what their children check out of the library, not library staff. I also believe the cost to implement this program would outweigh the benefits. Please take my concerns under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Isaiah Mannion.
Hi, I am Josiah. Hayden is my home library. First, I just want to acknowledge that we are operating on Skitsholm's land and water. So So I'm Josiah. I read as a white dude, and whatever the accuracy of that, I'm fine with it. I'm an Army veteran. I too have served with plenty of queer people, including trans people in the military. I was a Korean linguist. I'm a photographer and a scholar of critical theory. I have two daughters, both grown, avid book fanatics. One of them is super queer, one of them is super straight. Pretty much no matter from what standpoint other people might judge my daughters, I think that they can be seen as ample evidence that even if we grant the existence of such a thing as corruption, it's not from books themselves. It's rather, I think that they are good evidence that books and access to books are crucial to the development of empathy, intelligence, and creativity. So today, I simply want to extend my appreciation for the work of the vast majority of the librarians, the majority of the members of the board of the trustees, for the diligence of their work, their unflagging support for curiosity and the exploration of our various worlds, for their understanding that the core work of public libraries is to reflect not only the present needs, desires, demographics, or sociologies of their communities, but also to provide a sustainable and open foundation for those libraries' futures and for those libraries' communities' futures. So that means that we do not want a restricting of the public library to one private understanding of religion and its incumbent understandings of gender, sex and sexuality, race and disability, culture, history, ethics and morality, or physical and social sciences. Public libraries strive and should strive to reflect the multivalent possibilities of our community's futures and their open horizons of possibility for things like gender, sex and sexuality, race, ability, culture, history, ethics and morality, and physical and social sciences. By and large, I think that's what the board is doing and has been very capable of distinguishing between their public responsibilities and their private beliefs and roles in the world. And I deeply commend and appreciate those among you capable of doing that and taking consideration for both the present and possible futures of our communities. And I know that's what the librarians have been doing. No matter who comes into their libraries requesting services, whether it's a drag queen, an atheist, a pastor, a Trump 2024 supporter, a homeless person, or Reese Witherspoon, that should come into the library and not the bookstore. Our librarians will work equally and with equity to provide them all what they need a public library for.
Thank you. Kathy Wagner.
Kathy Wagner, Post Falls, Idaho. As a Christian woman, a parent, a grandparent, and a member of the Friends of the Library of Post Falls, I'm against the personal attacks on both the library personnel and the board members. As a parent and a grandparent, I know it is my responsibility and only my responsibility to what my child read and my two grandchildren read, 6 and 8. My grandson started coming here at 3 months. He enjoyed their programs. He loves the activities. He enjoys the books. I reviewed books at every level for both my daughter and my grandchildren. I talk to my daughter, she reviews their books. It is our responsibilities. This is what my mother showed me. This is what my mother did. As a result of my mother giving her 3 children the freedom to know what to read and to be able to explore our horizons, she ended up with children with their bachelors, masters, and doctorates. The same is being done throughout both my brothers, my sisters, and my families. I also vote. I've worked polls, and I will vote in May appropriately. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Hemming.
My name is Stephen Hemming. I'm a local pastor out in Hayden. I want to start by reading a scripture, historical document called the Bible.
This is from Proverbs chapter 31, verse 8. It says, "Open thy mouth for the dumb and the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy." I want to thank the women that are the investigators in these libraries that have brought to light and exposed the filth, the nastiness that is being peddled to our children here in our community. As a parent myself of small children, I won't bring my children to the library for that very purpose because they could be exposed to these nasty books. And so I'm very grateful for this exposure. The truth is that the things that expose the darkness are exposed by God. And for this past 2 years, that is what has been taking place in our community. And I believe that there is a huge portion of our community that has been really a sleeping giant, and it's a bride of a savior. And it's time for Christians in our community to take their civil duty and vote and come against these atrocities with assertiveness and directness, and with the power and boldness of the Holy Ghost within us, that we will restrain these things from taking place as long as this is called our community. And I completely agree that it is the parents' job and responsibility to guard our children. Well, part of that responsibility is placing trustees in our community voted here by the majority. And so that is.
I am asking the audience to please be silent while he speaks. Okay.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Part of that responsibility is voting for trustees. That's why the title is called a trustee. It's a trustee of the parents that have put you in place to help guardian our children. I want to read another portion of this historical book called The Truth of God's Word out of Romans chapter 1, beginning at verse 16. "For I am not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, for it is the power of God unto salvation to everyone that believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For therein is the righteousness of God revealed from faith to faith, that is, as it is written, the just shall live by faith. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth, suppress it, ignore it in their unrighteousness, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them.
Okay,
For
your
God
time is
has
up.
revealed it to them."
Thank you.
All right. Kate Hartley. Yeah, these are all
Wait,
the.
Kate hardly had to leave. She gave her comments to someone else. I will step out so that person can come in, if that will work. Yes? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Let the next person know who's on board. So.
And those seats available? Oh, there's a guy up there who wants to know what's happening. Can we invite him in?
Ask the chairman.
Can we invite him in? There's a man that's been waiting out there that wants to know what's going on.
We are keeping the room at that capacity. If there's room, if somebody else can come in and
Will somebody invite him?
I would like you to, we will take care of it. You're ready if you'd like to speak.
Okay, just a minute here.
The clock doesn't start, so after you say your name and where you're from.
No. Okay, Heather Greenman, Post Falls, Idaho. These books I had brought to the last board meeting. I read from this one, it's pornographic, by the way.
Can you give us the names of the books?
I brought them to the last meeting, Quarter Silver
Okay,
Flames,
okay.
Quarter Wings and Ruin, Quarter Frost and Starlight. Interesting thing happened. By the way, there's pornography I'm gonna present, so if anyone's not comfortable with that, if there's kids, please leave. This interesting thing happened when I took these books to the state legislative session and testified before the Education Committee for the Children's School and Library Protection Act. These books were quietly and magically reclassified as adult. The interesting thing is I have archive links that these books were adolescent. So I would like to know why the library moved them. And if the library will admit that those books were pornographic and that you do have pornographic books that are in the kids section of your local library. Otherwise, why did you remove them? And why did you remove them from the kids section and reclassify them as adult? Another interesting thing happened this morning. Representative Julianne Young, when the Children's School and Library Protection Act was being heard again, she referenced this book that has been brought before the board many times. And it is the book Identical by Ellen Hopkins. She seemed to have a lot of common sense and was very clear that the book is pornographic and it's not appropriate for kids. She said that her husband has worked with sex trauma survivors, kids and things like that. And I just would like the library to finally admit that this book is pornographic. I'm going to read just a little verse from this book. Obviously, there's many pages here. Daddy had been back to Kaylee for lollipop licking a few times. She had a vague notion that it was wrong, but she wasn't sure why and didn't know who to ask. They'd probably just be jealous. The warm summer night, she slept in a thin white nightie, nothing more, nothing at all under. The moon full shimmered against the tan of her exposed skin, and her hair whispered over the pillow like a pale waterfall. As usual, the smell of wild turkey proceeded from Daddy. In the bright moonlight, you could see Kaylee cringe in a shallow sleep. Daddy crept through the door to the side of the bed, stood looking down for a very long time before stirring her with a volley of kisses, cheeks, forehead, lips. Oh, little girl, do you know how beautiful you are? No one was ever as lovely as you, not even your mother when she was a child. I can't believe you're mine. Kaylee roused at his words, came into the moment, secure of the aura of Daddy's love. Stay just like that for Daddy. I want to teach you something new. He lifted her nightgown, rolled in over her belly, coaxed her, thoroughbred her legs apart. She squirmed a paltry protest. Don't move. Daddy's scarlet face underlined his command. I thought he might smack her. Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I ask a follow-up question of the speaker?
Yeah.
I thought that the library policy was that you don't,
I'm sorry,
that's fine,
board
that's fine.
member would like to ask you a question.
That's fine, and ask the question, but just change the policy. That's what you're gonna do.
I have asked the chair for permission to ask you a question. If you
Sure.
don't want me to ask you a question, I
Ask the
certainly
question.
won't. Could you tell me what book you were reading from just now?
That is the book Identical by Ellen Hopkins.
And I believe you were out of the room when Miss Wooster spoke earlier that she challenged that book and it has been reclassified to the adult section. Thank
Okay.
you, Ms. Grayman.
Well, thank you. After 15 months, you finally removed something, but you didn't say it was because it was pornographic. Oh, that was not one of the books.
Okay, that's enough. All right, Charles Coates.
My name's Charles. I live in Post Falls. I'm a dad and the son of a librarian. I'm not here to discuss LGBT book content or to debate the definitions of porn or obscenity. I don't represent a religion or a racial group. And if anyone ever dares mislabel me a patriarchal white Christian nationalist, they risk being sued for defamation of character. I'm concerned that a child of any age
can check out books with explicit sexual content without parental permission. We're not talking about Judy Blume books for kids or The Catcher in the Rye. On book selection, you've completely jumped the shark. This board and viewers at home can hear excerpts of your sexually explicit books available to children by Googling 3 words: Idaho Tribune disgusting. The chair of this board said last month that passages of books in your collection are, and I quote, absolutely awful. I completely agree with you. Most board meetings have speakers that have complained about policy along 3 lines. First, the books coming in. 1 million books were published last year. You added about 1 to 2% of those books to your collection. In my humble opinion, a tiny number of those books go against community values. We should be building a different book collection that exists in Berkeley, California. Second, your existing collection. I read an article on a librarian's website on how to design a book challenge process in order to stifle the reclassification of books. And your process follows that design to a T. Third is allowing children to check out books, as I mentioned, with sexually explicit content without parental consent. Again, we're not talking about Judy Blume books for teens from the 80s. Wanting to change this policy is an unassailable position. Other library networks have addressed this problem. Next week, I'll email you all a summary of those efforts. I'm not confident you'll read it. It's been 2 years. As of today, this board is not yet implemented of complaints from the community. As of today, this board has not yet implemented a policy to address this problem, such as setting sexually explicit books behind the counter so parents age 18+ can check them out on behalf of their children if desired. This would not remove 1 book. Whatever you do, tomorrow is too late, too little, too late. The board justifies inaction on all 3 fronts by citing the so-called Library Bill of Rights, a document with no force of law. When it comes to actual laws, your legal counsel interprets them narrowly to favor your anything goes approach. It's like a football game where all the close calls go to 1 team. Finally, your website makes the absurd claim that parents are responsible for the library books their children check out. Well, a 16-year-old can take their car to a library. A 13-year-old can take their bike to a library. A 10-year-old can go to the library on a class field trip. We need to trust the content that they get access to.
Your time, is that right? The time is up? Yes, your time is up. Thank you. Kevin Saunders? Is that right? Is he out there? Is that him? Okay. I thought that was Charles. No. Lori Stoltz. She's right here.
Okay, my name is Flori Stoltz, and I am a former special education teacher, and I also have a counseling background. I am a newly transplanted inhabitant here from California, and one of the things I wanted to say is that I really love your state. But it's interesting because the first thing they say is change your license plates because you know, your people like Idaho, the way Idaho is, they don't want it to be changed to a liberal California. But I have to tell you that this is the path that will make it liberal, definitely, and terribly woke. First of all, I want to say that the library has been very important to me, raising my 5 children and to being a teacher. And I feel like in having these type of books on, they're really pornographic, they're very disgusting and vile, especially having listened to the last meeting, just disgusting. And I feel like I believe my freedoms of having clean, wholesome books are being taken away from me as as people are saying their freedoms are taken away, but this is also my freedoms are taken away. I do not want to pay taxes for these disgusting pieces of literature. that it's not even literature, it's just trash. So what I do want to say is that, Idaho does have, Article 3, Section 24 does promote, temperance and morality. So that's what should be done here in the library. 74% of the voters, in regard to the, bill that is, currently trying to be put into place, 74% of the Idaho voters agree to keep the obscene materials away from the children. So that's like a majority. Majority of parents don't want their children to have access to these, books readily on the top shelves. They should be put away. Personally, I'm against having them in the library at all, but they should be put away so that they're locked behind or in the adult section, away from toddlers or young teens or even older teenagers. I think having a counseling background, they are going to be damaging them emotionally. And as they grow up, you might not notice it now, but down the road, these young adults will be the adults who are governing and living and being in this state. And talk about, you don't want it California, guess what? That's what you're gonna have. So, I love this.
Okay, your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Laura Carey.
Announcement next after that. Ready to go. So Laura Curie, is that correct?
Yeah. We just have a few more people.
The next day, please.
David Dyers.
Speak for me.
He's taking over for David Dyer.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Stephanie Wolf. I'm from Post Falls. I really wasn't planning on speaking today. I was in line. I went to the wrong library. I went to Hayden first. While I was in line, I saw this great little book on your little used bookshelf. And it reminded me of the books that I used to look at when I was a kid. And yeah, we were curious, and so we kind of look at, certain pages to find things out. There was a curiosity, and it was normal. And books like this were normal. I think that we're all feeling quite deceived because there's a bill that I don't even know what it is because I wasn't prepared to speak today. But there's a bill or legislation where libraries and schools can't be sued for, I guess, content on their shelves, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that these are the types of books that they were intending to be on our library shelves. You're using, and I don't just mean you, I mean nationwide, our libraries, our school libraries, they're using that legislation or bill to put in smut in our libraries, which was never intended. That was never the case. Books for children are what we want on our shelves. And I really feel that you're trying to pull a fast one on us because that's not what we want for our children. And I really think that you should consider where you are on this. I mean, is that really what you want your kids to bring home? Is that really what you want for them to be reading and sharing with their friends? Their little minds don't need to be bothered with all that. They're not ready for it yet. This is just fine for little ones. And I appreciate you letting me speak. And I just wanted to say, if I took some of those books off the shelf and handed them to some kid, you'd probably try and get me put in jail because it's not appropriate. And if some stranger handed that to your child, yeah, you have every right to think the worst.
Because what is their intent? And those kinds of books should not be on our public library shelves. And I thank you very much for letting me speak. Thank you.
That's the end of our list of, people who have. No, we've called everybody's name and. Yeah. All right. I am going to ask you to take a break. For just a few minutes. All right, we're gonna call this meeting back to order. The next item on the agenda is our discussion for library card for minors discussion. And we have that. We have our consultant here. Do we have our consultant? Is she online? You see her? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So, everybody have that, and do we have anybody, our director, as I said about 1,000 times, is, was called out on a family emergency at the very last minute. The one person I do have that might be able to help us address is Mark, our IT guy. So, we may have some opening remarks from our, board members about our policy.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and I appreciate the members of the public that have stayed to listen to this portion of our meeting. I think it's been said a couple of times during public comment that we have failed to do something for 2 years and that we are only doing something now as some result of duress, and that is absolutely false. We are not considering this policy out of duress. 2 years ago, 2 new members came onto this board, KCRCC endorsed candidates, and their first order of business was the programming policy. We also were onboarding a new director at that time. So the government moves slowly. The government moves slowly on purpose. We have to have notice of everything that we're doing. Notice has to go out to the public. We have policies that come in front of us that go through multiple iterations before they're passed. And what we were working on 2 summers ago was the programming policy. I believe Pastor Hemming has left, but his group presented a petition to us. I was trying to find it on my computer, and we incorporated the verbiage from that petition into our programming policy. So to suggest that this board has sat idly by and done nothing is patently untrue. Following our programming policy, when we had new board members come onto the board, we were reviewing existing policies. We started with the programming policy, then we moved on to the material selection policy. Several of you will remember that we were digesting and working our way through updating the material selection policy. We voluntarily, not under duress, put the language from the criminal code into our material selection policy. That was done intentionally and in response to what we have heard from the public. So this board has attempted to be responsive to comments from the public. Following the implementation of our new material selection policy, we again heard from the public that it was not working in the way they believed it should work. So rather than work with our existing policy, we have crafted a new policy. And what I tried to mention last month is that those of us that sit on this board are not librarians, we are volunteers. So we need help crafting policy. And we have also been struggling with a director that was here for, I don't know, maybe 18 months, about 18 months, and then left. And then we've been trying to find a new director. So it's very easy to accuse this board of inaction when you have not sat on our side of the room and tried to deal with the constraints that we have to deal with as a public entity and an elected board that can only take action as an elected board when we are all together. So following continued discussion after we adopted a new material selection policy, there were several members of this board that didn't feel that that was quite accomplished quite what we wanted to accomplish. So we reached out because our staff is inundated with, we are short-staffed. The complaints that have come in from the public have not only affected staff morale, but have affected our ability to hire new staff. So this is a library district that has been under siege and is trying to continue providing the best services as possible to the public. So as we had hired a recruiter to help us with our director search, we also leaned on that recruiter to serve as a consultant to us to create an entirely new policy that we hope is an answer to what the public is wanting. So that is my very long introduction to say that this board has been responsive. We are concerned. We do hear you, and we are trying to do what we can as a body to be responsive. But I would urge the public, and I have tried to, sitting on this side of the room multiple times, to use the tools that are at your disposal, which include requests for reconsideration, and which we heard from Ms. Wooster earlier have resulted in a reclassification of some books. If you will permit me, Katie, I did have quite a lengthy discussion with our interim director earlier today about this policy.
Well, I'd like us to talk about the policy first and then move in. You may have some things to say about implementation.
And just before I finish, I'm just urging the public to give our staff, the frontline staff are not, I just wish that they would not be attacked. And because we need to increase the morale, and they need and deserve a safe space to come and do their work. And we, as the ultimate employer of them, they are owed that under the law.
Okay. Does anybody else have anything they'd like to say on this policy? Because we have public hearing, we might want to talk about it a little bit. I'm going to read what basically the policy is and then the regulation. Parents and legal guardians can authorize, this is called the Library Cards for Minors policy. Parents and legal guardians can authorize their children under the age of 18 to have their own library card. The extent to which a minor child has access to the library's collection is the responsibility of their parent or legal guardian and is not dependent upon the minor child's age. So what we will be offering are 3 different types of library cards: access to the children's collection only, and the children's collection is geared for ages 0 to 12. And this collection includes books, graphic novels, and media such as DVDs and CDs. The majority of these items are designated easy or juvenile in the online catalog. And the second card is access to the children's collection, which is geared for ages 0 to 12, and to the teen collection. This is going to be a reconfigured young adult collection called the teen collection, which will be geared for ages 13 to 15. And the teen collection includes books, graphic novels, and media such as DVDs. And these items are going to be continue to be designated in the young adult section, even though it will be a reconfigured section. It is also important to note that, although we talked about it before, these cards also will have access to library computers, right?
Correct.
Yes. And we have other things. Another thing that is really important to continue to note: parents or legal guardians who, and this has always been so and is so right this minute, parents or legal guardians who have their own library card
can elect to have their cards of their children's linked to their card. And doing so, it would enable the parent or legal guardian to view the titles currently checked out on their child's card and the dates those items are due to be returned to the library. And that's something that is in place, although it's on this policy. So is there anything else people would like to talk about or have concerns about?
Yes, one of the audience members brought up the idea of informed consent. So I think that there should be something on the paper that people sign, and in the policy, something, it doesn't have to be this exact word, I just came up with it, so I'm sure someone could come up with something better. Informed consent. Parents should be aware that children may be exposed to sexually explicit materials in the various sections for minors in libraries that some will feel is inappropriate for their children. And I think that, would make things clear to a lot of parents. And that should be added.
Comments?
Well, I just wanted to make it also clear that just having the cards for minors available doesn't mean that the reconsideration to get rid of books like you're talking about is stopping. So that will still happen, the reconsiderations of the explicit sexual content in books, and that these just reclassify age-wise. And I'm not sure why some of the public would be against having cards for minors, seeing that they can opt out of them. So I'm not 100% sure why anybody would be against this when you don't have to do it for your children. It's completely optional. But I just want to make sure people know that the reconsideration still happens. And I don't know if that's what you're addressing with that.
Rochelle, where were you, are you suggesting something in the introduction, or do you want a new paragraph?
Regulations.
Well, I just was thinking of it when the audience member brought that up, so I put it down at the bottom because that's where there was space, but that might not be the best place for it.
Can we ask our consultant on the line to comment on the proposed change?
Depending how it was approached, I guess it could be a regulation, and it could also be part of the materials that you're going to be preparing for parents to consider when they're actually getting their child a card, renewing a child's card, or at any other time when they wish to change their child's card. So it could be part of the implementation and the marketing program that you make available. There may be other topics of concern to other parents that they also might wish to be aware of. So calling out one area perhaps indicates that you're less concerned about others. I don't know what those might be, but so I'm not sure where you would put it in here. The other the other possible place, I'm still dealing with a really bad cold, so I apologize for my voice cutting out on me. The other possible place to make this quite clear would be in your material selection policy as you start to further delineate and define what the scope of this new teen collection is, geared for children, teens 13 to 15, as well as the collection for children. So whether you wish to put it here or wish to address it in much greater detail elsewhere, you have multiple options. Could I also add something else while I'm chatting? I think it's also important to note that what was referred to as the access to the children's collection, or the one access to children's and teens, would also be limiting those card holders to only items owned by the community library network. So in other words, the titles that are owned by Coeur d'Alene or other libraries in your computer network system would not be eligible for borrowing on this card, nor could children use those cards or teens to access ebooks, streaming content, or online databases. So it really is limiting by design those cards to the materials that are in those two collections in your library system, not in other library systems. I know that's been a concern expressed by some of the members of the public about items that young people could access by borrowing it from one of your other neighboring libraries. This, if they had a restricted card, the child or teen would no longer be able to do that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, before that, yeah, it definitely should be in the paperwork that the parents sign, because that would be part of informed consent. Can you reread what you came up with? Okay, slow my chicken scratch. Yeah. Informed consent. Parents should be aware that children may be exposed to sexually explicit materials in the various sections for minors in the libraries. Comment that some will feel is inappropriate for their children.
Rochelle, this is June. I think that an advantage of having it in the materials that are actually being provided to parents would be, and again, I'm just sort of thinking out loud and speaking as you mentioned this, is perhaps that there is something actually that the parent takes away with them, a printed document that they understand, what the types of cards were and what choice they've made and therefore what's included and what's not included. One downside of having a policy, the person doesn't necessarily see the policy when they're making a decision, but the materials that they would be viewing, and perhaps it's unfortunate that Lindsay was called away because I know she's been thinking about an implementation plan. So what those materials would look like, or the staff starting to think about how they would be promoting this and what the various documents would look like. But I've made a note of that statement, and I know Janelle has been as well. So.
And I'm not saying I'm against your statement at all. I'm not saying I'm against it. But are you talking about they'd be exposed to books that were moved from the children's section to the adult section, or just in general, books in the library that are made for adults that might have sexually explicit content? No, well, right now we have materials in the children's section. No, but I mean, so, people could figure out what level that, even if they get a limited card for their child might still be exposed to things that they think are immoral.
Okay. One of my concerns is that the term sexually explicit or immoral or whatever means very different things to very different people. And to not to put it in this policy quickly seems to me that we're not thinking clearly. We have books. Another difficulty is what people mean when they're talking about children's section. So I'm going to talk about the cards. The children's section is material geared 0 to 12. The teen section, which will be a new reconfigured young adult department, is ages 13 to 15. What people might mean about sexually explicit material in the children's section 0 to 12 may not be the same across the board. And that would be something I think that would have to be carefully looked at. But I like the idea of putting something in part of the materials implementation plan, so that would be something that parents would take away on that order.
Well, just any words that we use would be interpreted differently by different people. So we do have to use some words, maybe immoral or inappropriate, or the list that we made when we first started this process of the library cards for minors. I don't think I have the list with me, but June probably has it. She's the one who asked the question. Anybody else?
I'd like to speak a minute on this policy, but also I think we already have both online and in print, but I think we can get better at putting it in print and having to hand it to each parent who's looking at this. A description of what the parents' rights and responsibilities are, what the children's department does, the difference between books for older kids and teens, browsing and navigating the library collection. So we have a few things in place already. Manage your child's library account. We've touched on it here, but there's also already things in place. And although we heard from we haven't over the last years as we've been puzzling through how to manage the library, input from a lot of folks. Many folks saying, don't mess with it, leave it alone, let my kids have access, I'll manage what they get, what they come to hear, and what I want them to hear or see or know. I want to be sure that we have both sides represented here in some balance, which is always hard. But providing tools for parents to me is a major responsibility we as a board have for empowering parents to manage their kids' choices, whether it's in the library or anywhere else in a confused and challenging cultural society. Morals are tough to determine. So I think having this card that identifies age appropriateness is about as much, and even that's a bit of a constraint, but I think it's a tool that's useful to parents. And so I like the definition of age a little bit more than we used to have. And part of our requirement then, I think, as a board is for our staff to be sure and get printed material not only on the web, but it's handed to every parent that checks the book out to remind them of what they have as a tool and an opportunity for those teachable moments.
One of the things I think it's important to point out is this is an opt-in card. That this is not, parents get to choose for their minor child what level of access they would like their child to have at the library. But if a parent, and one of the levels is open access, and that would be unless a parent states, I'd like my child to have a children's card only or a teen card only, then the child is given an open access card, which can be changed at any time or anything a parent would want. So,
And a minor child can't get a library card
without a parent's signature.
under the age of 18.
No, they cannot.
I have a couple more comments, but first I have a question for Mark, since you're our fill-in Lindsay. Could you, I understand why the limited access cards aren't gonna be able to check out books from the CIN at large, but why wouldn't it work with the Coeur d'Alene Library?
So the way that we are envisioning being able to implement this, and I'm not going to get into the horrific details because it gets quite detailed, but the primary reason why, say, a person with a restricted minor card could not get materials in from Coeur d'Alene is because we're going to have to recatalog all of our materials in the juvenile and the young adult section to be of an item type that works. Other libraries in CIN are not necessarily going to do that, which means that those materials would be outside of the range of what that card could access, just like the adult materials in our libraries.
This is why that I did have questions about the Dewey Decimal System, because and isn't the juvenile collection in the Dewey Decimal System juvenile? That's where I guess I'm confused. And I don't want you to get into the jargon either, but help me a little bit more, Mark.
Right. So at the basic level where we tell the system how long items check out for, whether they can be renewed, stuff like that, it's actually tied to what's called the item type. And the item type is a book or a DVD or something like that. So what we have to do is we have to create new item types for it to work against, because that's where it makes that connection. So how it is cataloged, juvenile or YA in the in the cataloging Dewey Decimal or wherever, that doesn't change anything. It's what the item type is. We have to actually create new item types to make it work.
So does that preempt Dewey Decimal System is by the category it's in?
As far as circulation goes, yes. Dewey Decimal just basically tells us where it is in the library.
Yeah, if I might be wrong on this, but you're saying the new category is linked to that card. So that card can only
Right,
access
that card could
those
only
items.
access those certain item types. And we would put the juvenile items in those item types.
Okay, so thank you. That makes a lot of sense. And this is why, just for the benefit of the public that maybe not have this policy in front of them or had as much training as we've had on it, why the policy itself recommends that the parent also have a library card, because if you happen to be perusing the Coeur d'Alene Library and your child wants to check something out at the Coeur d'Alene Library, the parent's card would work. Is that fair? Okay. Okay, I have a couple more things. Sorry, everyone, but we did allocate quite a few minutes to this discussion. Right, and so I just want to come back to what I was saying before about staff. We have, based on the library reports we received this month, I appreciated that the Post Falls manager put in that the Post Falls Library alone has 76,000 items in its collection, 76,000 items. And they add an average of 800 items every month. So the idea that there is intentional peddling of porn is just false. Okay, it's false. I want the public to understand that the librarians are relying on, well, what it is that librarians rely on to order materials. They aren't getting, they don't come in to the library and they're read from cover to cover before they're put on the shelf. That's just not how it works. And so, yes, it has taken members of the public coming in here and reading to us to show us that the world of literature has changed, and the material that once upon a time you would not think was in young adult is in young adult. So we are acknowledging that. We are not acknowledging that there's been any knowing violation of Idaho Code. I think that's important to say. But what we are saying is that the world of literature has changed. There is material that has become more sexually explicit. And we are making a purposeful decision to recategorize or retool the young adult section into a teen section. The teen section will have material that is suitable for ages 13 to 15. If it's deemed to be more targeting a 17-year-old, then that material is going to be in the adult section. That is what's going to happen if the board passes this policy. Since our interim director is not here, I had called her this morning because during our training on this policy, she had mentioned that, you're not going to be able to call the library tomorrow and say, can I get my child a kid card? So I wanted to have a realistic discussion with her about when could this plan be implemented. We can pass the policy today, but when will it actually be implemented? And so the recommendation from Lindsay is that we do need a two-step process. The kid card is the more easier.
We're talking about kid cards. We're talking about the children's card.
Yes, the one geared to 0 to 12. My understanding is that's a little bit easier of a implementation, but that still will take some time. The targeted deadline that I discussed with our interim director was whether we could have that implemented no later than July 1. And she thought that that was doable. Before I talk about the next, I'll let you talk, Mark. You look like you want to say something.
Just a second that, the idea that this does take time to test and implement, because we need to test this in a test environment first to make sure it's doing what we think it will do, and we do have a test environment that we can use. Test it out, make sure it's working like we expect it to, and then start slowly programming our live system to have that stuff in it as well. And then, of course, there's creating a new card type does not take too long. The big time frame will be re-cataloging all the materials. I cannot speak myself to how long that will take. Cataloging is not my day-to-day operations, so I can't speak to that, but I can tell you it will take some time.
Does it take, does the re-cataloging is the children's department, the juvenile department, that is not requiring to be re-cataloged?
As far as going through, and it will need, at a minimum, the item types will need to be changed for each item, and we can create some processes to help speed that along. The young adult to teen is where we're going through and more doing the fine tooth comb to see if it's 13 to 15. That will probably take longer, yes. The 0 through 12 will probably not take quite as long. I hesitate at this point, without having started to do some initial testing, to commit to how long that would take. I do not anticipate it would take an excessive amount of time, though.
Could I follow up on that, Manager? Because I think we as a board are doing two things. We need to ask you about it as staff, be realistic about what we expect. And understand that when we do that, we've committed you to doing some things that we've never done before, that we may not get it quite right. So part of that is testing. We count on the parents who are using it to feed back to us if we missed something or we got it right. And then it means we can't do some other things that are on our agenda. And that's, I think, part of what a management board does is say, okay, this has risen to a priority that we need to have our staff do. And we want to do it right quick. Okay. Then there are some other things on the agenda that may fall off. And as Regina pointed out earlier, they don't fall off, but they get delayed because of priorities and shuffling. That's an ongoing effort that we do as a board every meeting. What will fit, what we need to get a new date on. And I think that's important. We understand that as a board, no less as a public, for how fast and how well can we do it. Starting when we pass the policy. But I think my understanding is we also, as a board, send our staff off to ask how it's been done other places, so we can learn from other folks' experience. That gives us a baseline, but doesn't give us a greased process to make it happen.
And would you be doing the children's and teens at the same time? Or are you doing the children's first and then moving on to the teens after you see how well it went with the children section?
I don't know that I could commit to an answer yet. I think, assuming a policy is created and passed at some point, I think our first step would be to answer that question of would we do it in 2 stages or would we try to do it in 1? I think that that's a discussion that still needs to occur.
And that's the other part that I had yet to get to, which is that it will take longer to address the teen collection, the retooling of the teen collection. And when I talked with Lindsay earlier today, I discussed with her implementing that no later than January 1. And she thought that was very doable. Thoughts?
And it wouldn't be heroic, it would be heroic if you got done sooner. That's okay too.
Yeah, once again, I come in it more from the IT perspective rather than the cataloging perspective. I don't know as much about the cataloging. Just based on what I know about that, though, that does not seem unreasonable.
To be clear, what we're doing for juvenile is we're not changing much of the department. What we're doing for young adults is completely reconfiguring it, completely. It's a new department. And so every single book has to be reconfigured in that. And that's time consuming, tremendously time consuming.
Follow up with having asked our staff to look into it. I believe we also have a consultant that helped us learn about this process. And June, is there anything in here that you hear us discussing today that we've forgotten to think about or to identify as opportunities described as challenges?
I haven't had an opportunity to speak to Lindsay about implementation, so I don't know, Regina, what she was including in that concept. So for example, I can think of at least two different ways to implement the teen collection. I mean, or when to consider when the teen collection is done, so to speak. One would be that the card type was created and the minor had access to what's currently in the young adult collection, but not the adult collection, recognizing that there may be things or will be things that subsequently would be moved out of the young adult collection into the adult collection. So whether the initial implementation is that the restriction means no adults, or whether they don't get restricted until the teen collection is done and reconfigured, I don't know what her intent is. And certainly it would take longer, which is perhaps why she gave you the January 1 date, to be able to actually, have staff look at the items specifically, the titles in the collection, and make informed decisions about them, but I don't know. So I think you've got great staff, and I'm sure they're going to come up with a really solid implementation plan. And Lindsay would probably have an answer to that question if she were able to be with us now. So perhaps at your next meeting, she'll be able to give you a lot more information about her thinking and why things will take the way they are and what needs to be done.
Right, and it was very fortunate, obviously, now in hindsight, that I was able to talk to her at length this morning. And the thought process was not to introduce the teen card until the teen collection is able to be reconfigured. So along those lines, I'm open, Rochelle, to your suggestion that there be an informed consent of some type drafted to go on, however it's implemented when parents are shown their options. But I don't think it necessarily fits in this policy, because the purpose of the library card for minors policy, in my mind, is that the children's and the teens sections will not have sexually explicit content in them. So my druthers would be to not include that informed consent verbiage in this draft we have in front of us.
Well, I have seen books even in the 0 to 11 or 0 to 12-year-old section where they have pictured full frontal nudity of adults with pubic hair and the whole 9 yards. And one of them encouraged children to masturbate until they're old enough to have sex with other people. So
We would need to look at those books specifically. And know what they were.
Could I follow up then on the informed consent topic? Because of putting in material selection. Because I think the wording I wrote down, these was children may be exposed to sexual material in the collection, which is the whole library, right? Compared to, are we defining it as only in the juvenile section?
Okay, I see what you were saying earlier. No, it should be in there that it's throughout all the collections, but that they still may be exposed even in the minor sections to this type of material. I think, that's part of informed consent. And if someone's signing up their child up for something, they should know what they're signing their child up for.
We have our attorney here. Do you have any opinions?
Let's introduce her.
Katie Brereton.
Well,
She doesn't have a mic, does she?
I'll get you a mic, so that'll give you more think time.
Thank you, Katie.
I do have, it's a couple of thoughts. But what I would like to do is maybe look into, the language that you've, started with and maybe see if, we can start from there. And then maybe about the idea about when it's, when something like that would be communicated to the parent. It may not necessarily, in my head, it may be times when they're signing up for a library card for their child. So that would be either at, if it's just the minor who is getting it, or if it's specifically for, this library card. And then I would just kind of also, like to look into a little bit more about, the need for informed consent, in such a situation, because informed consent has a very specific legal meaning. And I don't want the library to assume a duty, which by law it doesn't have. Because that could be problematic from a legal standpoint. So I'd like to be able to give it a little bit more thought before being able to really provide an informed opinion about it.
That was better expressed my concerns. We may be putting something in here which is more than that we don't understand. And it isn't that, I think this is an important topic to make sure that we come back to. But I would hate to see it stop us from moving forward when we couldn't, we can get advice from our attorney on how to put it, how to put something like that in and where. And if it's the correct place here. Just taking it from a comment, from public comment and not taking any time other than, I'm not at all comfortable with putting something in this without having had it looked at, particularly after the words informed consent also concern me. I'm like, what does that mean? So that's a thought that I have. I would hate to see us not move forward on this because we have momentum. But also we can make sure that the whole issue of informed consent on sexually explicit materials is one that stays on the agenda, and we ask our attorney about it and see where it might fit, where it's the most appropriate place to put it. So.
And I would like that because I think we know where all the ripples go. But for the policy now, there's no reason why we can't continue with adopting it at this time. And then as time goes along, we may still need to be finding some more policies meant to be tested and adjusted if we need to along the way. But this is a good start, and I'd like to get that started as soon as we can. I think Rochelle, the point you put in here, one of the points where we encourage parents to get a card. Interesting concept that will come in and have a child get a card and the parents don't have one. When we talked about it last time around, we thought, little marketing there, while you're in here, why don't you get a card too? I think that makes good sense. So I had time to think about that and I like it. I like it. Everything else about the policy now that we've had it, looked at it, we've heard from a consultant who's helped us with it, which brings us to a national look at things from June's perspective. Our own staff has begun to call around and look at it. There'll probably be more to be done. But the concepts here, I think, are important enough to get it to pass today.
Okay, so if this does pass today, and it takes months to implement it, or, some months and then, a lot of months for the full thing, when does this actually, this paper, or when does this actually get, on the, you know, on the website, or when is, what's the time frame for that? Since we pass it, somebody might, as we were talking, somebody might read this and tomorrow be like, give me your, you know, the children's card. So how does that work if we pass it today and then it's not implemented for months?
Well, that was exactly why I had wanted to talk to Lindsay, because I feel that it's important as part, that we make it part of the motion. I mean, that we adopt this policy, knowing that it will not be able to be implemented, and then we have this phasing of the implementation.
But she's also asking, how do we put it, how do we let people know? And, you know, does the policy go on?
I did talk with Lindsay about that too. Which is, you know, the library has all sorts of tools that we communicate with our patrons. We have the newsletter and we have emails. And so I thought that there was discussion about notifying the public, and that they will be notified, but not be able to come in and sign up for a card until later. The last thing I want to say, and then, because I know I've talked a lot, but we have heard from both sides of the community. We have received emails. We heard people earlier today. We have also received emails saying, please don't pass this policy. And I want to say why I am inclined to pass the policy. And it's something that our consultant said when we were reviewing what our options were. And she said to tell the public that it's the parent's responsibility, but then not providing parents with tools that they feel that they can use is, you know, I don't know exactly how you put it, June, but essentially you said it's almost an empty words to say it's on the parents. If the parents would like better tools available to them, then that's what this policy does. And for those users that don't want to limit their children's access, well, they don't have to. So I'm prepared to make a motion, but I don't know if June, since I called you out on your quote, maybe you want to correct me.
No, that's probably what I said. I think the important thing to note is that the access is reflected by the collection, not the age of the child. So if, for example, a parent of a 10-year-old wished to provide that child with access to the children's collection and the teen collection, they could. The only option is not just the adult collection or only children's. By the same token, if they had a child who perhaps was 13 or maybe even 14, whose reading level was such that they would be best served by the materials in the children's collection, then that's an option that the parent could also exercise. So we're talking about the scope of the collection, not the age of the minor child. And again, each parent would know his or her child better, and obviously, and not every child is alike, even in the same family. So parents could make informed decisions. That was the intent, was to give them the tools.
That's what I was gonna clarify, June, that this card is very individual, each child, and within our family, different children were different developmental ages and interests. And we can customize it to that child's situation and change it as they go.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
And yes, and getting back to Rochelle's comment when we were developing this about encouraging parents. I mean, just imagine a family that's getting a new puppy, and the puppy training books are in the adult section, and their 13-year-old or their 10-year-old is perfectly capable of reading the puppy training book, and probably going to be involved, I hope, in training the puppy. That adult book could be checked. The book from the adult collection could be checked out on the parent's card, even though the child's card couldn't be used for that purpose. And so, if they had a limited access card.
So maybe I could suggest that instead of using the words informed consent, we could just put parents should be informed that children may be exposed to materials the parents feel are objectionable in any of the sections of the library, and then we could hash out you know, what exactly the parent.
Do we have to use the word objectionable? Can we, can we find something else? Fair.
Objective. Yeah, I
Right,
thought
it's fair,
objectionable was actually pretty soft compared to what's in the library.
There are things, many things in the library that many people find objectionable, you know, throughout the library. I mean, just using the library, reading a book can be considered challenge. That is the nature of libraries, is that they have providing access to information and ideas to people, to a full, you know, a full community of people is going to present, you know, information and ideas that many people don't. I find something objectionable and the person next to me does not. And that's what using the, you use the library at your own risk. You know, I mean, I'm willing to think of that. I just don't, I can't think of words that are, if you got some
Katie?
suggestions, Jen, yes.
Katie, this is really an important concept and one that I think deserves more conversation. And it's really unfortunate, as you've mentioned a number of times, that Lindsay can't be here. I would strongly encourage the board to, wait to discuss this point at its next meeting with your interim director present and with the advice of attorney about how best to approach this concept and where it's best included in your policies and your other written documents and all of the other places. It merits serious conversation, and I'm afraid without one of the key players not able to be with you today, and with your attorney's request for time to think about it, that I would suggest you move forward with what you can and recognize that, I think as Judy said, no policy is done. Nothing prevents you from revising this, next month, the month after that, or any time in the future as other things surface and as other things come to light that you want to address.
That she expressed my concerns, because I think it's a very important topic. And I do think this library needs to address it. And I do think that we need more time to do that. But I'd like us to get started on this part. This can always be changed. And our implementation, we're not implementing it right now anyway. So.
And I guess I would jump in on that because the struggle we've had and part of the response to the community is we as the board here, it is there are lots of different opinions we've heard from the community. And volumes of knowing the criteria for how we decide what to do. And so I keep thinking about all the folks who come to us over the last 2 years and said, don't mess with it, leave it alone, we'll manage our children. Well, that's one version. Compromise to me, like we talked about a two-handed attorney, you only want a one-handed attorney because they can't say on this hand you do this and on that hand you do that.
Sorry, I'm very sorry.
But we hear you.
Love them all.
All the jokes. For a council is, if we've got both sides concerned, we're probably in the middle, or somewhere in the middle, and that's where I want to be as a board member, respecting everybody's interpretation of what's objectionable, what's sexually explicit. Those are dynamite terms, or dynamite around the state and around the world. So I too am ready to get this part going. And if Virginia's ready to make the motion, do you need a second for it?
No.
No. Oh, fine, Judy. Okay.
I think, whether Rochelle, your verbiage goes into the policy in a revision next month, or whether it's part of the implementation plan, I think we can be open to that. So I move that we adopt the library card for minors policy board draft March 16, 2023, and have a target date for implementation on the children's card by July 1 and for the teen card by January 1.
Okay, it's been moved to adopt the library cards for minors policy board draft dated March 16th, 2023.
with a target date for implementation of the children's card, July 1, 2023, and the implementation for the teen collection section by January 1, 2024.
Yes,
Ooh, I did it.
very, very nice.
All right, any more discussion?
Oh, the only other discussion is, we don't have to wait that long, we can get it done sooner. So
He heard you.
I think that represents all the board's concerned, the sooner the better, but there is a finite time to it. And, can't wait to have you come back and report to us how fast it's going.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out that that timeline shows everybody what the size of the job is.
Yeah.
Because I didn't even, I knew it was gonna be a lot, but I didn't realize it was this much, so it's very hard work.
It's probably gonna be worse than it is. It usually costs more, takes longer than anything you do, right?
Okay, great.
At least I said the building business.
All right. Anything else? Okay, it's been moved, oh, here we go, there we go, then it's been moved to adopt the library cards for minors policy dated March 16, 2023, with a target date of implementing the children's collection section by July 1 of 2023 and the teen collection section by January 1, 2024. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, I very much appreciate you all being willing to move forward.
Thank you, June.
Yes, June, thank you very much. And I would like to say that June is not just our recruiter, she's also a consultant for policy making and has written an entire book on policy development. So we didn't just pull the recruiter out of the sky. And the next item on the agenda was going to be the director's report. And Mark, thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's going to be the director's report, but since the director is not here, I know that she will want to address this. And some of what she wanted to address was already talked about in public comment that some of our books that have come for reconsideration recently. She wanted to report on some of what has been done with that, but she had more to say about that. So we will hear about that the next time we can get together. I would assume this would be April. So with that, the next item on the agenda is executive session in order to consider hiring a public officer, which is working on our hiring a new director. And I am going to have to say that, let's see, we have both our recruiter and our attorney here for that section. And I am going to have to ask the public to leave because it's executive session and staff.